All right, this is Daf Yomi in motion number 821. Today we're going to learn Daf Kuf Aleph in Bab Metzia, and we're going to be speaking about Hamecher Zeisai Le'etzim, someone who sells their olive trees for the purpose of having them cut down, use firewood, and so now you have a person, and they're still attached to the ground. And so the person who has sold the trees, he owns the land, but the person who bought the trees owns the trees. We're going to start the Mishnah on Kuf Amid Beis at the bottom. Zakta like a Mishnah. Hamoicher zeisayv le'etzim, someone who sells his trees, his olive trees, for eitzim, for burning to somebody else. The osu b'chois miravias l'saw, and the person didn't cut the trees down immediately. He left them in the ground, and then olives grew, but the olives that grew were bad. They weren't strong. They weren't good. So they didn't produce normal amount of oil. They only produced less than a revius to a saw. So since it's like insignificant, and it wasn't stated how quickly the person is supposed to cut down the trees, he would just sold them stam for firewood. He was assuming it would get cut down, but he didn't tell him how quickly he wanted it cut down. And the amount of oil that was produced was insignificant, was negligible. So then the oil goes to the person who bought the trees. Hari elu shel bal hazesi. That the zayas, the shemen, will belong to the person who bought the trees. However, also revius l'sa zeomer. So, however, if they produced a significant amount of oil, and no, it wasn't stated how quickly the person was supposed to take the trees down, and he had left them there long enough that the olives could grow, and they grew and they produced a normal amount of oil. So zeomer zeisai godlo, zeomer artsai godlo yachloku. So this person, the one who owns the tree, says it was my trees that nourished the olives and that produced them, and therefore all the oil is mine. And the one who had the land said that it was the nourishment came from the land. So I deserve to have the olives, because I sold them to you for sreifa, for burning, not for producing olives. And any oil that would come from them he has a right to. Yachloku. This is not sumchas din of mammon motel b'safik yachloku. Rather, the Rashi explains unfortunately explained that it's yachloku because each of them really has a right claim, a true claim. Each of them, what they owned really contributed to the yanika, to the growth of the olives. The ground contributed, and also the trees contributed. That's why there's a yachloku over here. However, what about the case that after the field was, in general, a different case? Someone had a field with olive trees. Shot afnar zeisai v'nosnam l'toich sdei chaveru. So now the river overflowed, totally swamped the field, uprooted the olive trees, and moved them to somebody else's field, and then they started gaining root in somebody else's field. And then olives grew. So who owns these olives? Who owns the oil that came from the olives? So zeomer zeisai godlo v'zeomer artsai godlo yachloku. Here's again, it's the same din that both of them really the trees were yoinik the olives, and also the land nourished the olives, and so they both had deserved just half of the produce. So they split. Zok the Gemara. Hechidami, what's the case talking about over here? Id omar le kaitz la'alter. If the moicher had told the person to cut down the olive trees immediately and use them for fire. Like, what's the case that we're saying that they're going to be splitting, that they both have a right to the oil? How did he state it when he was selling? If he told them to cut them down immediately, I want these trees off my land, I'm selling to you on condition that you get them off right away. So then he didn't get them off right away because he left them there enough time for the olives to grow. So then the olives should really belong to the owner of the field, of the karka. Either Omarle koitz la'alter, afilu pachois miravias nami lebala karka. So then any oil that would come from it should be owned by the bala karka, not just the lot, even less than a revias, because because the owner of the tree, the person who bought the trees, did wrong by not taking them away right away. And also because the bala karka was megala his das, that he was machbid, that he didn't want the trees there. And so if the trees were there, it was still considered his. So we can't say that he was Michael because he was machbid to state in the beginning that he wanted the trees taken away right away. Either Omar like call Amas, the boyes kites, if he told the Moicher told the Lokeach, whenever you want, you can just cut them down. I'm not in a rush. So then, now it should also be pashut that the oil should belong to the Lokeach, the one who bought the trees. So afilu revius, even the good oil, the good amount of oil that would come, nami lebal zeisi, should belong to the owner of the trees, because there was no limit for how long he could keep the trees there, and he did buy the trees. So mashma that the moicher was giving him time, and it should belong to him. But the Gemara says no. It's not. So mashma, according to this, that it would be pasha. Why does the Mishnah have a shaila? Why does the Mishnah have a suffix that we have to say yachloku? If they stipulated, there must have been some type of stipulation in the beginning of the mecher. So the Gemara says no. We needed to learn the din because there wasn't the stipulation. There wasn't really any stipulation. It was just sold stam. Lo tzricha to omar le stama. He said, "Stam, here, I'm selling you these trees," and he didn't tell him how quickly he was supposed to get the trees off the land. That's when we said, Pechos Miravias. That's why if it's Pechos Miravias, we said it's okay to belong to the owner of the Lokeach, who bought the trees, because Lokapte Inshe, because people wouldn't be machbid about such a small amount of oil. However, a Revias, and then we say that if a significant amount of oil was produced, a Revias Kapte Inshe, and therefore, he should have a right, since his land did help produce the olives, he should have a right to half of them. Omer Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. This Revius that we're talking about, that they will split half. He has the Bala Karka has the right to half, but he doesn't. It's not like he has. If it's sold on the shuk, the amount of money that would be received for this oil is not what the Bala Karka would receive, because you have to subtract the expenses for producing that amount of oil, meaning the picking, the harvesting of the olives, and the squeezing and the crushing of the olives. Chutz min hahoitzah. That's what the Bala Karka will receive, the Moiche will receive. And the Mishnah then said that if the river overflowed and uprooted the olive trees and placed them on somebody else's land, shotaf nahar zeisad. So Omar Ula. So we said over there the din was also that the Bala Karka and the Bala Eitzim will split any produce that grows while the Eitzim are there. Omar Ula. Omar Reish Lakish, in the name of Reish Lakish, Lo Shanu Ela Shineakru Begushehen Ula Achar Shalosh. That when do we say they will Yachloku? They will split half of the produce. That's only when the tree that landed in the other field has together with it the gush, the dirt around its roots, that it still has its nourishment. Because if it didn't, then there's then there would be a problem. Then nobody would be able to split for the first 3 years because it would be an Isser of Orla. Even if the trees that were uprooted were older than 3 years old, but if they're being replanted, then there would be a new Isser of Orla for those 3 years after the new planting. But if they still have their Yanika from the old dirt, so then they don't have to start 3 years over again, and they're considered past 3 years. There's no Isser of Orla. So that's why they're allowed to split any produce that is produced right away. And also it has to be la'achar. That's why it has to have the gush. Rashi says in the top line of Rashi, "She'ne'akru begushehen, imakake shesvivosehen, she'yecholin lichiyos al yodo patur min orla." That's what putters them from orla. Kitnan. Ilan shnekar vesela imo in Sechtas Orla, as long as it has its nourishment down by its roots, imo im yachol lichiyos, if it can survive that way, potter from Orla ve'imlo v'chayev Orla. It also has to be that when they will start splitting the produce will be after 3 years. Rashi says, "Ula achar shalosh klomar afilu nekru begushayin." Even if they did come along with their gush, to split it evenly, that would only be after 3 years, because for the first 3 years, the owner of the tree will be able to eat the produce right away. But for those first 3 years, the owner of the karka won't be able to. Rashi says, "Lo shanu diyach loiku." We're only talking about splitting the produce between the two of them after the first 3 years. Lo shanu diyach loiku ela la'achar shlosh shanim sheshotfan hanar, after they got swept away. She'ilu notlan mitchila, because if they were the Bala Karka had bought new trees and just planted them in his field, he wouldn't be able to use them because they're newly planted trees. They would have to wait 3 years. Mitchila Bala Karka below Gushayin, if they had bought them without the nourishment coming with them, he would have had to wait 3 years. Right. Below Gushayin, Kvar yotzu achshav mechala orla dahashta lo mahani le gushin the balazes midi la achar shalosh. He's saying the only time that the balazes would have to share any of the produce with the other person is after 3, because for the first 3 years, it's his tree and it's his nourishment. Why should he have to share anything with the Bala Karka? But after 3 years, even if after 3 years, the owner of the field could say, "I could have planted my own trees, and after 3 years, I would have been able to eat from them. So now that you have your trees here, you're blocking me from having been able to plant trees, from being able to have hana from them." So now that's a good taina. So now that's why after 3 years, they have to share the owner of the trees has to share the produce with the owner of the karka because of that taina. So that's Reish Lachish. It has to have the gush, because if it didn't have the gush, the owner of the tree wouldn't have been able to eat, not in the first 3 years, and not after the first 3 years. So by having the gush and waiting 3 years, that's after the first 3 years, that's when they have to share. But for the first 3 years, just the owner of the trees gets to eat the produce. That's what it says. Lo shanu ela shenekra bigusheinu la'achar shalosh. Aval b'toch shalosh, but for the first 3 years, hakol shel bal hazesim. Only the bal hazesim, the owner of the tree, gets to eat the produce, the olives. To Omar Le, the reason is because there's a taina. To Omar Le, iad notato b'toch shalosh, because the bal hazesim can tell the owner of the karka that if you had bought new trees, you wouldn't have been able to eat them for the first 3 years. So why should you be able to eat them now with me? B'toch shalosh. Mi havi ochal ochalta, ochilta, you wouldn't have been able to eat. The lema, right? So that's the Tana. If you couldn't have eaten, if you had planted yourself, why should you be able to eat now? Like you can't Tana, oh, because your trees are here, I couldn't put new trees on my land. Even if you did put new trees on your land, you wouldn't have been able to eat them. So there's no reason, you have no Tana that the person who put his tree, that the fact that the trees are there, it's being ma'akev him from being able to eat produce. The Gemara says, well, why shouldn't he be able to eat for those first 3 years? He should have a Tana that he should be able to eat. If I had planted now, instead of your trees being there, if I had taken new trees and planted them, so after 3, I would have been able to eat all by myself. I wouldn't have had to share them with you. So the fact that I'm going to be sharing with you after 3, you should give me to share with you and to eat half of the perus within the first 3 years. I would have eaten them all by myself if I had planted trees, even though I wouldn't have been able to use them for the first 3 years. But after 3 years, I wouldn't have had to share them with anybody. So hashta dika'al dika'achalt palgabel dai. Now, at least let me eat half with you, since I'm going to have to let you eat half after 3 years. But Reish Lakish is not saying that. Reish Lakish is saying that it's only after 3 years. Why is it that Taina doesn't allow him to eat for the first 3 years? The Kiyosa Rabin, according to this, they should be able to eat from the beginning. And that was according to Reish Lakish. But Rabin is coming and quoting Reish Lakish. Kiyosa Rabin Amar Reish Lakish. Lo shanu ele shenakru bigush ehen ubetoich shalosh. He changes. He says no. But the yachloku, when they're sharing the perus, is true with the nourishment, the gush, the dirt around its roots, but also they're only yachloku within the first 3 years. Because he seems to be changing because of the taina that the Balakarka was saying that you should be sharing with me for those first 3 years, because if I had planted them by myself, you wouldn't have been able to eat after 3 years with me. I would have been able to eat them all by myself. So you should be splitting the produce with me now. After 3, then he can eat all the pears by himself. The reason for that is the Omar Le, the same time that we just saw before. Because he'll say, the Omar Le, ona notai la'achar shalosh, milo havi achilna, because if I had planted them now, if your trees weren't here, I would have been, after 3, I would have been able to eat them by myself. So now that your trees are here and I can't plant trees, so I should be able to eat after 3 by myself. So Gemara says, yes, true, but the Balazaysim has a taina back. If you had planted your own trees, so for the first 3 years, you would not have been able to eat. Lo havi yochalto. Achilat, you wouldn't have eaten. So hashta ka achelis palgba hadoi. So now you should be eating half after the 3, since if you had planted yourself, you wouldn't have been able to eat. And if I have to split the produce with you, so you should split it with me after the 3. And so then, right? So why is it only for the first 3 years? The more answers. The reason it's for that we see Yachloku only during the first 3 years, where the Balakarka does get to eat together with the Balazesim. Shum de Omar Le, he has like a last final taina. If I had planted them, Habi katinai v'zar'ana tachtosayu silka v'yarka. No, because if I had planted, true, I wouldn't have been able to eat. That's not a reason that I have to, and the fact that you're splitting the produce with me during the first 3 years doesn't mean I have to split the produce with you after the first 3 years, because I would have benefited by planting my own small trees, because there would have been shade. They wouldn't have been such big trees. They wouldn't have created so much shade. I would have been able to use the land underneath the trees for vegetables. And the fact that you had your trees there, I lost out in that way. And therefore, that's why the taina, which the Baal Hazeisim had before, that, oh, you're eating half of my produce, so I should eat half of your produce. Because of this taina, it doesn't go that far, and the Baal HaKarka gets to eat for the first 3 years, but the Baal HaZeisim doesn't get to eat after the first 3 years. And that's Reish Lakish, according to Ravin.